Ron Chalfie of Finn Corporation. I'm here at Security Equipment just outside of Baltimore with help from Derek Holmes. And we are going to review for you a startup of a BB302 bark blower. So let's talk about being prepared for your demo slash startup. And I think that begins with making sure you're dressed properly. I know you all can exercise common sense, but don't forget to bring a pair of gloves. Wear boots. Wear pants that you don't mind getting dirty. Blowing bark or compost is a filthy job, and you're going to need to get right in there with the guy that you sold this machine to make sure that he's comfortable, that you know what the heck you're talking about, what you're doing. And that's going to mean running this machine, getting right in there, opening up that airlock, feeding it from the front, handling mulch. You want to be prepared for your demo. So along the lines of the preparedness that we've talked about, I think it's important for you to bring a couple of other things with you to your startup. Duct tape. As we all know, you're going to need duct tape to address any kind of cuts or holes in the hose. Makes sense to maybe bring a large crescent wrench, maybe even a cheater bar or a pipe that you can put over that crescent wrench. What you're going to do with that is, in the unfortunate circumstance of having that airlock seize up, you're going to want to put that crescent wrench on your rotor to muscle it loose. Probably also makes sense to bring some WD-40 that you could spray on these couplings to make them easier to go together. And another suggestion would be bring a rubber mallet. Sometimes those clips, when you're hooking these quick connects together, are just so stubborn, it would help to have a rubber mallet. So I always like to go over with people how this system is powered. And I start by telling them, remember, you've got a Yanmar diesel engine, Tier 4 final, 35 horsepower, that is direct coupled to this blower that produces 500 CFM at 10 PSI. What does that all mean? It means when the engine's running, the blower's blowing, and you're going to be able to push mulch and a couple of other items. We'll talk about those later. But getting back to the engine for a moment, there's certain things that you need to do to take care of that engine, starting with the front. Now, I've already pulled the pin on this radiator screen, but you need to occasionally pull this screen out, shake it out, clear it out, make sure that the fines from the mulch are getting out of this screen so that you've got a nice clear airflow, okay? Pay attention to the maintenance in your Yanmar manual according to the manual that you got when you received the machine. Got a couple of grease points on the shaft. In between the shaft on the blower and the shaft on the engine is a coupler, and that flex coupler is designed to give in the event of, say, a catastrophe like overfeeding, misalignment, so that both of these things stay intact and that this inexpensive wear item in between is easily replaced. You got a couple of grease points on your blower that you need to pay attention to. You also have special fluid in here that should be changed annually. I want to say that it's a Mobile SHC 630, something like that. Your parts guys and our parts guys should be able to get that for you. So we also have the engine air filter that you need to pay attention to and change periodically. I'm not going to get into the frequency or the interval. That's all in your manual, and every mechanic has a different take on that. But suffice it to say, you need to pay attention to the engine air filter, and this one is critical. This is your blower inlet filter. This is the thing that's going to provide the screening for this blower, making sure that all the fines don't get in there and choke the machine. You want to make sure that your guy pulls this little wing nut off each day, pulls that filter off, and shakes it out, and periodically replaces it. Okay, so we talked about a little bit about the engine and Tier 4 final. So what does it mean for you? I think the best thing I can tell you is the 302 is meant to be run at a high throttle anyway. And if you consistently run the thing at a high throttle, the regen on this machine is going to occur in the background. This is what people call a passive regen machine. And hopefully you'll never run into a situation where you have to worry about actively regenerating or stopping what you're doing. If you always run this thing at a high throttle, it should occur in the background to where it's transparent to you. So I'd like to start with the trailer. The first thing I point out to folks is the pintle hitch. Very straightforward, but just remember, you've got adjustments so that no matter what vehicle you're towing with, it'll make for an easy ride. I talked about the trailer plug. 7-way flat. Very straightforward and basic, but don't take for granted that it's perfect every time you hook up. I also like to point out the chains. Easily open, easily close. Just push this little latch in the back to open it up and hook up. I also like to point out the breakaway. not to be used as a parking brake, but it's truly a breakaway, so that when the vehicle that's towing this accidentally pops off the hitch, this is designed to lock up the brakes when the machine is going down the road. So the next thing I like to do is I point out the tires, and I remind people, check your wear on your tires every now and then. Don't take for granted that the tires are in good shape. And honestly, check your lugs every now and then. You want to make sure that your tire's not going to fly off going down the road, which has happened in the past. It's rare, but it happens. I also like to point out the lights. Make sure that your lenses are intact so that people can see you when you're turning or stopping. Make sure that your lights are working. All right, so now that brings us to the airlock. And just to give you a review, the airlock is a rotor that is revolving within a barrel. And it's going to take the material that this drag chain is bringing to the rear and drops into this airlock, and each of these pockets of material is going to revolve around and drop into the airstream produced by that engine blower combo. And it's going to go out this discharge through your hose. How long of a hose can I put on there? This machine comes with 150 feet. You can easily push mulch through that. You may be able to go longer lengths, but remember, the shorter the run of the hose, the more productive the machine is. Regardless of what you've heard, this machine is not designed for aggregate or even topsoil. The 302 is designed for mulches, composts, and your lighter materials. If you've had success with those other materials, fantastic. But I'm just telling you, the lighter the material is more appropriate for this machine. If you want to push those other materials with some sort of frequency, we should be talking about another machine. Let's talk for just a moment about the airlock and maintenance. There's not a lot that you can do to this airlock before it needs to be rebuilt or replaced, but what you can do to preserve the life of that airlock is to make sure that this knife blade is adjusted every now and then and is kept sharp as possible. And when I say adjusted, all you need to do is underneath of here there are set bolts, and occasionally you're going to need to adjust this knife blade by getting it to where it sweeps right up against that rotor, so that as the rotor comes around, that blade is sweeping the fines off of the end of the rotor tip, and it's maintaining a nice tight seal with the rotor, which is actually also going to help keep the air seal as tight as possible and keep the air in the airlock. And a third thing that it does, which is the most obvious, is that if something is sticking up out of the airlock as it moves around, it's going to shear it. So in order to adjust the chain, this is the slack adjustment bearing right here. And you've got this much of adjustment to start with. And occasionally, as I was saying, you're going to need to take up the slack by placing a wrench on these bolts and drawing this bearing forward to take up the slack. Eventually, this gap is going to be completely closed and the bearing is up against the wall. Then it's time to shorten your chain. In order to do that, you're going to probably need to remove a link, or depending on the age of the chain and the condition of the slats, you may even be able to remove a slat and you'll still achieve the same objective. And then all you need to do is move your bearing back to the farthest back that you can, so to speak, and start again. All right, so now I want to talk about the cleanout. This front cleanout tray is critical to be looked at on a daily basis, maybe even more frequently if you're putting a lot of material through there. All you need to do is pull this little cotter pin out of this rod here and pull the rod through and pick up this front cover. And after a bunch of yards of mulch have gone through, this is going to be packed, and you're going to want to clear this out so that you're not impeding the chain. If you leave it, if your customer leaves this, especially in these overnight lows that get pretty cold, you may freeze. And when the chain is revolving, trying to push through a frozen block of mulch, we've seen in the past where the chain will snap and this shaft can even bend. So it's important to just take 2 minutes to clean out this front cleanout tray. So now we're going to talk about powering up the machine. I want to talk about the control panel, which is covered by this nice cover here that's intended to keep the thing out of the elements. Lift your panel. You got a key switch here. Turn it to the on position. Make sure that your hydraulics are on. Make sure that you've twisted your little e-stop here to let it pop out, and also on the handheld remote. I'm now ready to start. All I need to do is hit my engine start twice. Once, gets my fuel pump going, give it a second, let the Yanmar thing light up, hit it again and hold it. Give the machine a minute to warm up. And we're going to start with the remote control. In order to power up the remote, I want to press this green button, hold it for a second. I now have my RX light is lit, it's blinking. I want to double check. Hold my engine and increase, it's throttling up. I am live, so to speak, with my remote. Okay, I'm going to throttle it down so that you can hear me. At this point, I want to get my airlock moving. In order to do that, I push the green button on the pendant. This is called the pendant. It's on this pigtail coil. It is magnetic. It's designed to be used by the person that is at the machine. So he can stick it here, he can stick it on the front wall, he can stick it inside his snake pocket. But this is for the guy who's back at the machine feeding it. I hit my material start button, then my airlock should be moving. So if it's not, what do you think is wrong? Chances are, it's these safety switches. They're not engaged. I'm going to double check, tighten them up, make sure that I've got good contact back here. I can see that they were loose last time I opened the door. Now, let's double check. Hit my material start button again, and voila, my airlock is moving. Okay, so now, engine's running. We've tested our pendant, our airlock is moving, our remote is live. I'm ready to start my floor. Before I get that floor moving, when I have material in it, I want to make sure that I have the throttle all the way up. I want to have a good airstream before I throw material into that airstream. So for the purposes of this exercise, let's assume for a moment that the throttle is all the way up. But I'm going to leave it down so that y'all can hear me. To get the floor moving, all I have to do is hit my floor increase button about 10 times, roughly. Then you can see that the floor chain is moving. It may look slow to you, and that will speed up once I throttle all the way up. So I'm going to do that now so you can get a better visual of what the chain looks like. My chain floor's moving, my airlock's moving, my remote's working, I'm mulching. I want to stop. I hit stop material on here. I move my hose to the next bed. I want to start again. All I've got to do is hit start. The airlock starts immediately, and about a second later the floor chain moves. You're now ready to go. In the event of an emergency, I can hit this e-stop or that e-stop, and it's going to have the same effect. Kills everything. So once you've hit the e-stop, you've shut the machine down, you must start everything over again from scratch, okay? So I've depressed my e-stop, I've turned this thing off, I start from scratch. Again, just a reminder, twist here, turn this key, start my engine by depressing that button twice, engine starts, push my green button on my remote to get it ready, check my throttle, hit start on the pendant, that'll get my airlock moving, and then I'm going to hit my floor increase a number of times, about 10 to 12, maybe more, to get the chain moving to the desired speed. At that point, you are ready to start mulching. And the best advice I can give you at that point is Don't heap it up. Don't choke the machine. This is really a mulch pump. It's designed to be a continuous feed machine, whether somebody's feeding with a loader or from a towing vehicle. Feed it consistently. Don't overfeed it. Give it a nice bed of mulch, and you'll have great success.